Here. Here. Okay. So the purpose of this meeting is to review the following. Number one, the 2014-15 Parent and Student Handbook revisions for the Lowell High School Handbook and the Elementary and Middle School Handbook. The second item on the agenda is the United Teen Equality Center Alternative Diploma Program Report. The third item is the Superintendent's Goal 6 Alternative School Update with a focus on the Engagement Center. Okay? So do you want to take us through?
The first item on the agenda is the student handbook, and I'm going to turn it over first to Roxanne Howe to present revisions to the Lowell High School handbook, and then I'll speak a little to any of the differences in the elementary middle school handbook. Everything that you see identified in red are the changes, and the cover pages delineates those changes.
Good evening. Pages 1 and 3 of the student handbook have been updated to indicate that the handbook will be online. We are not printing copies this year. And the page 3 has a piece at the bottom that allows parents who do not have access to the internet to inform the school, and we will get them a hard copy. Page 7 is just the condom availability exemption form, which we utilized last year. We're actually putting it in this year's handbook so we don't have to do a separate mailing.
Ms. Howe? Just out of curiosity, do we know how many opt-outs we received last year?
I can't say for sure. I thought it was around 50.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Pages 16 and 17 is just an update on personnel on the school committee, and 17 is update of personnel at the high school, administrators at the high school. Page 21 is just an update of last year's 2013 honorees for the distinguished alumni. Page 22 is an update of the school calendar, which the school committee approved last year. Page 32, under prohibited items, we added e-cigarettes, which are also called vapes, which have become an issue in both the middle and the high school level. So we just wanted to be clear that those are prohibited on school grounds.
So just for a point of clarification, we've added e-cigarettes to the elementary and middle school handbooks as well as a
Correct.
prohibited item? Okay, excellent, thank you.
Page 35 is just indicating our update on safety measures. It's now called options-based response. Page 39 is just about visitors to the schools, both elementary, middle, and high school, to ensure that they realize that they are also responsible for abiding by school rules. Page 42 and 43 starts the discipline section, which is the new law that came in, Chapter 222. I think I'm going to turn it over to Attorney Ortiz for this section.
I just had a quick question on visitation at the high school.
Correct?
Now, are visitors required to present an identification?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
So we actually have a new system that went into effect last year.
Yeah.
We have a software program that scans their driver's license and
Okay.
then generates a ID, temporary
All right.
ID.
So can we list that in this, that identification is required?
Sure.
Because it's not listed here.
Okay.
Just want to mitigate folks coming in without ID and complaining and saying they weren't informed in advance.
We'll take care of that.
it's not on? Oh, I'm sorry. So I can repeat that if you. 222 is a new law that was written, and it's basically designed to address all other suspensions except for 37H and a half and 37H suspensions, which are assault, weapons, drugs, and felony arrests. So that's the first page, and I think we reordered the handbook somewhat to focus and make parents aware of what the violations are in the first place. Because if you look at the previous handbooks, this part was in a few pages afterwards. We just felt that it would be beneficial to parents if they saw what the violations were immediately when they look under discipline. So it's a better frame of conversation, it's a better flow of conversation, and it's more aware for them. Because that's the essence of what 222, it's really making parents aware of what discipline is and making sure that we're complying with due process rights. We also changed some of the wording in some of the types of discipline and consolidated some of them. So again, noncompliance with school rules, we included safety and drills. 129, there were concerns about unauthorized use of phones, cameras. All the phones have cameras now. They also have recording devices. Students have phones in schools, appropriately and inappropriately. When they have it in school, how do we protect everyone else's rights within that school not to be recorded, not to be photographed without their consent? So we wanted to make sure that we put something in there to protect students and to protect staff members. So this was what motivated this language at 29. Again, other school violations, there were a bunch of different sections to it, and again, we consolidated it to make it more user-friendly so that it was all in one place.
Okay. So under number 29 with the unauthorized use, unauthorized and illegal use of technology, et cetera, now, last year, we had made some changes, I believe, where we allowed our students, high school students, to use their cell phones in the cafeteria.
Correct. And the cell phone policy itself is not changing from last year. We had discussed whether we should be looking at changes, and for next year, we're not.
Okay. So this is in here for the purposes of essentially privacy,
Correct.
right? And I'm not, and that's not very clear. So there's a cross message, a conflicting message here is what I'm seeing. So we're authorizing cell phone use in the cafeteria, but yet we're prohibiting the use of cell phones in devices.
Well, I think, the focus of this is even if they are authorized to use their cell phone, let's say in the cafeteria, they are not authorized to be videotaping events in the cafeteria.
Or recording individuals
Okay.
in the cafeteria.
Okay.
Or recording teachers necessarily. Some students will use an iPhone because their IEP has some requirement that they have mathematics, so they can use it as a calculator, but that doesn't mean that you can record conversations that teachers are having or videotape the teachers. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think what Kristen is asking, though, or saying is, it says unauthorized and/or illegal use of technology. I guess it just doesn't define what that means.
That's right.
In the cell phone policy, in the next section, it does actually define how you can use the cell phone.
Okay.
And the illegal part will be defined by criminal law, case law, for example, upskirting.
Okay.
That's illegal, you can't do that. We didn't put that in here, but illegality covers all those different sections.
Okay.
Next, when you go to the bottom of page 43, they talk about school-wide education plans. Pursuant to the new regulations, chapter 222, if a student's suspended, it doesn't matter what circumstances they're suspended for, the school district has an obligation to make sure that the child has the opportunity to make and to continue their educational progress. So whether that be through tutoring, makeup work, makeup assignments, whatever it might be, that this opportunity exists for them. So part of the new law is that schools are going to have to develop these plans to how that's going to be delivered to these kids in those circumstances. And I don't know if Janine wants to add anything to that, but
As part of leadership at the start of the year, we will be working with principals on the attendance intervention plans and their plans as well for this piece of it, so that we try to get some sort of consistent model across the district.
Again, when you look at page 44, there was an addition of a habitual school offender, and I think that's tied to the initiative that's part of 222 around attendance, because we had to conform with the new law around attendance. So we need to provide notice around that, so that's a notification for parents that this is something we'll be doing, if necessary. And then the next few pages is the law itself, which explains what an in-school suspension is, because 222 breaks suspensions down into basically 4 different categories. One is in-school suspension, as you can see on page 44, which talks about that. Page 45, it talks about short-term suspensions, which are 10 days or less. In-school suspensions is anything not more than 10 days. Then they talk about emergency removals. And I apologize, I don't know how intricate you want me to get into this, so I'm just glossing over. If you have any questions, please, I don't mean to be disrespectful. Emergency removal is when a student creates a risk to the school, creates a severe disruption, the school will have the right to remove the student for 2 days pending a hearing. The difference between emergency removal and short-term suspensions is short-term suspensions, before you can remove the student, you have to have the hearing first. That's somewhat of a change in how many school districts have dealt with 222. In Lowell, we've been very fortunate that we've been ahead of the curve in the sense that we've always done a lot of what 222 has been asking and is imposing on school districts. So both Jane and I and the assistant superintendent, we feel very confident that we're in a much better position than a lot of other school districts. And as the assistant superintendent indicated, it's not that we don't have to do training around it, but we're much more confident that we can fulfill this. The emergency removal is you can remove a student without having the hearing first, and that will be limited for 2 days. But the big thing about 222 is it empowers parents to appeal their suspensions, even to the superintendent. Before, it wasn't clear what the parents' rights to appeal to the superintendent was. Under 222, it delineates clearly their rights to appeal to the superintendent. So for example, emergency removals, you have a right to appeal that to the superintendent. Long-term suspensions, that can be appealed to the superintendent, and long-term suspensions is anything that exceeds 11 days. So if you get a short-term suspension for 12 days, that's now considered a long-term suspension, even if that occurred in September, October, and we're now in April. So there's some record-keeping, tracking of data that we're going to have to really figure out how to do, because we're going to have to assist principals to be able to keep track of that. And I know the assistant superintendent and Dr. Howe and the headmaster are working on all those different areas. And then the long-term suspensions, which again are anything 11 days or more. Parents will have a right to appeal long-term suspensions to the superintendent, as well as emergency removals. There will not be an appeal of in-school suspensions unless it exceeds 11 days for a school year. And emergency removals, short-term suspensions, again, unless the short-term suspensions exceed 11 days, there's no right to appeal to the superintendent. So it creates another hurdle. So in essence, everything's being treated the way in essence 37H and 37H and a half hearings are.
Go right ahead.
So the emergency removal process, so as far as the parental notification of their rights to appeal to the superintendent, and this is obviously it's an emergency situation, so it's happening, I mean, how does that timeline going to?
So what would happen is if the students K through 3, before the principal could suspend the student, the principal would have to contact the superintendent's office or the designee assigned by the superintendent and indicate, we want to suspend Mike Ortiz. He's a first grader at XYZ school. He's unsafe. If the superintendent is okay with that, and there's no reason that the superintendent wouldn't be, the principal's indicating this, the principal would have a right to remove the student for 2 days. Within that 2-day period, if this occurs on Monday, by Wednesday, there has to be a meeting, a hearing with the parent, where the parent has a right to say, was this emergency removal appropriate or not? The principal would then be incumbent on the principal to provide the information as to why the removal occurred. Your son was tipping over desks, trying to hit people. We were really concerned, this is why we did it. The parent would have a right to present witnesses, testimony, whatever case they wanted to do to convince the principal that that might not be appropriate, or there's no additional actions required. The principal would be free to agree with the parent, you're right, we're good, we don't have to do anything else. Or the principal could say, based on this emergency removal, we might have to do something more. We might have to impose a 5-day suspension. We might have to consider an alternative school referral if it's an older student. K-3, the superintendent always has to be informed of any removal from school. Anything above K-3, the superintendent doesn't have to be informed before the process begins. But this emergency removal, you have the hearing. Once the decision's made on the hearing, if the parent disagrees, they need to make a written request to the superintendent to appeal that decision, in which case it could be overturned, it could be supported, it could be amended, whatever the case might be, depending on how that goes forward.
And just one more, sorry. And as far as the I just see a paperwork function involved with this. How is that going to be
And I
tracked?
believe the assistant superintendent's in the process of developing that paperwork, and we've been involved in that.
Actually, I've been working very closely with staff counsel on this, and we've shared some documents with our administrators for feedback. What we want to make sure that we do is we provide all the parents and the students with their rights, but as well as to assist our administrators in really documenting things well. So the forms that we've drafted at this point are now in the hands of our X2 experts to develop suspension and tracking devices for us.
Again, page 50, again, it's talking about the insertion, we're inserting the key parts of the law into the handbook. The next change appears to be on page 52, where we talk about, again, when a student's suspended under 222, it doesn't matter whether it's an emergency removal, short-term suspension, long-term suspension, regardless of what it is, the student always has a right to make educational progress. And the concern the state had was, if you remove a student and they're not continuing their education, when they come back, they're not going to be able to get back on task. So the next piece goes in page 53 is the attendance, and I know I'll defer that back because I know the assistant superintendent worked very hard with that.
So the first change is on page 54, just clarifying that in and out of school suspensions are excused. There's been a little bit of confusion in the past. They always have been, but we just wanted to clarify that. Page 55, again, refers back to the attendance intervention plan at the district level for absences will be available on the district website. So what the plan is for students who have to make up their work. Page 56, again, it's just further clarifying failure to compel CRAs. Attorney Ortiz, if you want to just, oh, sorry.
So this is also required under the new attendance regulations and the attendance intervention plan that we'll bring forward to the next subcommittee for your review. We just wanted to be very clear to families about our legal obligations if a child does not attend school.
Page 57, under cutting classes, again, we're just clarifying that a cut class could result in credit loss. That's not a change in policy, it's again just clarifying language. Page 58, again, this is another part of the chapter 222, so it impacts our discipline and also our attendance policy. So again, I guess I'll turn it back over to Attorney Ortiz.
Right. So again, basically some parts of this are a carryover from what was already in the handbook. Again, it was just, there's a piece of this that talks about attendance review boards when it comes to non-consecutive excused absences. And we really need to have a process of, and the state wanted it to be clear that districts, when a student's going to leave our schools, we need to make sure that the student is doing so knowing the full ramifications of that. the fact that if you leave high school without getting a diploma, what the impact is that's going to be on you. Your opportunities to pursue alternative education opportunities if they exist, and I think that's part of the discussions later on in this meeting. The state wanted to make sure that students basically meet with somebody before they make that drastic decision to give up their education and really decide, is this truly appropriate, and what the circumstances would be for that. So that's really the discussion around what the attendance review board is and when it takes effect. Otherwise, that's really the significant piece there, is that, and I know the high school has some form of that through the attendance officers. It's just making sure that there's more of an awareness piece, and that's strengthened and documented more as we go forward. So at this point, I don't know if the assistant superintendent has any additional comment on that, because that's also part of her attendance policy initiative, so.
And then on page 59, it's the buyback policy, and the housemasters worked on this together with the headmaster. It's an issue of, as you are aware, students have too many absences. Even though they pass the class, they can't get credit unless they do buyback. What we found is buyback is making up time. They've already passed the course. They've done the coursework. So the headmaster is really encouraging us to look at buyback a little differently, and he'd like to see community service projects, and so that's what's now been included in the buyback, the opportunity to do that. So that's 59 and 60. And again, it's clarifying language on, what they need to do, who needs to sign off on it. And then the last changes are on the harassment bullying policy on 75 and 76. And again, it's just an update of language from the law.
Right. And in essence, they added additional language to also, if you look at the bottom of 75, where they talk about that they're also concerned about harassment and bullying against students who have gender identity issues, against students who are homeless. So basically what they did was just expand the classification of who could be bullied. So that's the significant part that will impact Lowell High School. There are other parts of it that impact how we collect our data, but that's not relevant to the handbook itself. So.
Okay. All right, great. Shall we move on to?
So as far as the elementary and middle school handbook, the only other addition that is different from the Lowell High School piece that I'd bring your attention to is page 2-1, which we just updated some information on no school delays and in case of snow and inclement weather. And we clarified that if a parent opted to keep their child home on a day where the school was in session, that it would not be considered an excused absence.
Okay. All right. Okay. Great. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the two attorneys for coming, and your time is extremely valuable, and we're appreciative for you being here. If you'd like to step out at this time, you're welcome to. You're welcome to stay for the remainder of the subcommittee meeting and the rest of the other one if you want. So moving along.
Hold on, I just want to thank you for your great work on these two handbooks. Certainly, there have been, new elements of the law that have to have been incorporated into our handbooks, and you've done a really great job at tying all that in and making it very clear and explicit to our families. Thank you.
Right, thank you, and Dr.
Thank
Howe
you.
and the assistant superintendent were part of that process as well, so thank you.
Thank you both. So the next item on the agenda is relative to a request by school committee for additional information regarding our UTEC Alternative Diploma Program. And Greg Croto, Executive Director of UTEC, is here, and you have a copy of the report in front of you. There were two versions of the report, and one of them, at first, we were hoping to even get additional funding for UTEC, so the edition that you have in front of you has the most updated information.
All right.
Thanks again for having me here, and thanks again, Assistant Superintendent, for helping put all this together. And thanks again for the school committee for all their support of the alternative diploma program. So I'll try to be brief, and I'm happy to answer any and all questions. I can kind of walk through a little bit of the report.
Sure, that'd be great.
And happy to get to answer any questions. But we do appreciate the support. We've been doing this now for a few years. As you know, back in, I think it's been now, this is going on to our third year in the new model we have, where the school committee has provided support for us in the budget. And so in the 2012 academic year, we had 12 young people graduate, and the graduation rate was 70% of every young person that was eligible to graduate within that year graduated. So we're very proud of that. I should say I'm filling in. Hopefully I'll do okay tonight. Our alternative diploma director just gave birth. Well, he didn't give birth, but his wife gave birth to beautiful Lucy. And so I'll do my best, and hopefully I can answer all these. But he's done a great job with his team to get a 70% graduation rate. This year, we have 11 graduates, similar 70% graduation rate, so we're really pleased with that rate. You'll see some stats here. So it says this year we have 34 academically engaged young people, but over the course of the year, on the last page, or the second to last page, we have 48 young people served. So when we first embarked on this, we capped it at, I think, 30 or 32 students. We've gone beyond that over the past couple of years, particularly because, as you know, young people come to us and they may only need a certain time, 4 or 5 credits, so they may not be there for the whole year. So that's why you'll see we really served more than we first anticipated, 48. But at any given point in time, we have a capacity of about 32 students. So that's kind of the brief, and you'll see in the back page, I won't go all the details, but we're fortunate now to have a really great performance measurement team. And so the data we're providing here is pretty easy for us to put together at this point, and we're happy to share any and all additional information. But we do serve young people that have a variety of risk factors, whether it be parenting, pregnant, court involvement, gang involvement. That's who we really want to serve. So we use the word proven risk for the young people we serve. And so we've had a great partnership with all the house masters and the guidance counselors in referring young people to us, but also our street workers on occasion will have young people that they'll identify on the street as well. So just moving through quickly, and again, I apologize, you may know all this, but some of the primary components of the program is it's really focused around project-based learning. So we try to make that piece kind of a major piece of the learning, so it comes to life. You'll see science classes where the canal and using that as like an experiential component to it, autobiographies in the English class. Another major component is the wraparound services. So instead of using we have transitional coaches, which is our term for case managers. So every young person that's part of ADP has a transitional coach that will also stay with that young person beyond their graduation as well. So that's not necessarily in this proposal, but our transitional coaches will stick with them usually for 2 years plus. So every young person meets with them at the very beginning to kind of figure out what are the challenges outside of school, knowing full well that a good chunk of our job is to make sure those obstacles don't interfere with their consistent attendance. So there's a strong partnership between the transitional coaches and the teachers. And so that's another big component. We do have a Pathways to College program, so we've done college visits throughout the area. We also, are working with Middlesex Community College in terms of dual enrollment, and we've had successful students engage in that as well. And again, it goes on to talk more about some of the other enrichment activities between Appalachian Mountain Club. We have a strong partnership. Mill City Grows, they're out there in the farming program. And we also, at UTEC, have a strong civic engagement program. So we try to bring that and integrate that into the learning that they have as well. So skipping towards the latter half of the report, we had, as Assistant Superintendent mentioned, we were originally requesting $400,000, given that our budget is beyond that. Our budget, as you can see, is closer to $700,000. We've been very fortunate because of the partnerships we've had to be able to get grant funding. Obviously, our concern is most grants, as you know, will provide the seed funding, and then after a certain amount of years, that may no longer be there. So today, we're here just to make sure that you have all the updated information. We've obviously adjusted the budget to move forward and work with the $200,000 if the school committee so chooses to reinstate that.
So I just have a couple questions. So are the young people who are engaged in the ADP program, are they also engaged in your workforce development
No,
training?
no, it's
Do they
separate.
have that opportunity?
They do have the opportunity, so like, for example, the culinary program is a good example. The ADP students will take advantage of the kitchen, but it's two separate programs.
Okay.
So,
And then, as I understand, and perhaps I'm incorrect, but I was of the understanding that, so one of the grants that funded this particular program for you expired. So that was how much?
so I don't remember the exact amount overall, but it was through, through DESI, it was a partnership with the district. This year, we actually do have, I believe, about, I think, 30 some odd $1,000 left that can be carried over to this school year. And so that was an additional boost to the program that we had. So when we didn't necessarily have, when we were having 200,000 from the district, from the foundation budget, we had the additional 100,000 or so from that grant. This year, we're only going to have, I think, roughly 30-ish thousand. So.
So there was a reduction of $70,000 in your overall?
The grant was a 3-year grant and tapered down. We actually received it twice, so we actually, not every district got it, but we were able to get it for the second time as well.
Okay. So in the coming year, will your grant writers be, writing for additional grants, obviously, to complement the funding that we provide?
Yeah, so I mean, as you can see, so we're writing grants all the time, and so we are able to offset that because the budget is close to 700,000. We've been fortunate. UTEC has taken the lead. We've worked in partnership with the district and other times, but we've received a variety of foundation grants that help provide that offset. So we'll have to continue to do that as well.
All right. Anybody have any questions? Ms. Mott?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I just had a couple quick questions just on the report primarily. Could you tell me how you calculate your graduation rate? I was just kind of looking across the grid there, and I wasn't clear how you come to the 70%.
Yeah, so I don't think and again, I may have to defer to Roy, who's our director, but basically the 70% is of those students who are eligible to graduate within that year. So there's an assessment period at the very beginning, how many credits they have. They work with the guidance counselors to determine that. So at that given point in time, Roy will indicate this person, if they showed up every day, they could graduate. And so that's the basics of it.
Okay, so it doesn't correlate with the engagement number?
No.
Okay, okay. And then I'm guessing, as I was looking at the your student characteristics, so is the academically engaged, what does that delineate? Because it seems like that's a smaller number than the total number you're working with.
Yeah. So academically engaged means they've completed at least one class in credit. So because we do have some young people, because of the nature of the young people we work with, they'll come in for a bit. We'll still stick with them as a transitional coach, and they'll still receive the case management service no matter what. But that academic gauge to show that they've actually gone through at least one class.
I see.
Okay. Okay, so that's the difference between the 70, 71, and the
Correct.
50, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My last question would be, just looking at the budget, and I'm not sure when this changed, maybe it was 3 years ago when you said you kind of fundamentally changed the program, I apologize for not being aware of it. The relationship between the UTEC program and adult basic education, does that remain in place now, or is it a totally separate?
It's, so we still have a partnership with Lowell Adult Education, and so we have, a certified instructor works in partnership. It teaches the GED component, which is for the workforce program. So it's a separate program.
So the teachers are no longer directly from adult basic ed, you have independent?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah. And so it doesn't show up in this budget, so it's a whole separate.
Well, because that's a workforce portion, so that wouldn't so that wouldn't show up here. Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome, thank you. And the only other piece I think we included in the last page was a memo from DESI that basically indicated that the ADP program was selected amongst all the different programs in the state that are part of this HSGI grant to be a part of an evaluation because of the performance. So again, I think collectively we're very pleased about that. I think DESI's been very impressed. They've had now 2 site visits that have gone extraordinarily well. And so this will be coming up over the next academic year, and we'll have a full-fledged, be part of their kind of highlights as well, so.
Okay. Well, it's an excellent program, and I've worked with a number of young people from UTEC through my day job, and really, it's, the services that are provided are terrific and duly appreciated in the community. And, you know, just to be clear, you know, in the budget process, when I had suggested that we put $100,000 in abeyance or in suspense, it was not to be punitive. It was really because we had very little information as to, you know, what we were actually paying for. And I appreciate your efforts tonight and being here and providing us with a good deal of reporting.
Our pleasure, yeah.
Thank you.
And any questions, we're happy to answer any more as well, so.
Mr. Jennings.
Thanks, Madam Chairwoman. Through you to Mr. Croto. Greg, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you identify students for this program. Are these kids who are already dropped out on the street that you identify through your street worker program and then bring in?
Sure, yeah, so it's a combination, so the street workers will always identify young people that have previously dropped out of high school, and they'll be able to refer them in, but also the house masters have been really good in identifying young people, either who have recently dropped out or on the verge of dropping out or being, you know, so it's a combination of both prevention and recovery, so.
I see. And are these individuals ones that you would also, you know, be classified in your gang-related type criteria, or not always?
It's not 100%, but it's a mix. So we do look for, you know, the risk factors. So we want to serve the young people that, you know, have the most need. And so whether it be pregnant parenting, usually the majority of young people will have some type of criminal background sometimes as well. So, but it does vary from student to student.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much. You know, I'd say really to kind of continue on in the line of my colleague, Mr. Gendron, I think one of the key, one of the most important aspects of the UTEC program really is that it represents a program for students that can't be served in other ways. I've long been a supporter of us recognizing that we need to have different school environments for students so they can be successful. And I think what is most encouraging, and certainly the success stories are perhaps the most hard fought for, is because we have students who have real challenges, and this program is specifically designed to work with those students in those situations. And I think that's the key for us in all of our alternative school programming, whatever it is, that we're designing programming that is either that we're providing or that our partners are providing, that give students the best options when they cannot be successful in a traditional model. Recognizing that all kids come to us with different needs, and our job is to meet them where they are and give them what they need to be successful. So I do think that UTEC has always been a very important component of that kind of continuum of opportunities that we offer to our students.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to thank Greg for coming this evening and for working with his staff to prepare this report. I'd also like to commend them for the work that they have done with our students. I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the graduation ceremonies, and touched me to see many of my freshmen who I'm grateful that had an opportunity to be successful and graduate. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank UTEC for their work that they do for our students, and I would want to make a motion to transfer the $100,000 from the suspense account back to the funding. I don't know the exact name of the line.
Yeah,
And I look forward to continued communication and receiving
Absolutely.
data in the future.
I
Thank
second
you.
that.
Second.
Roll call.
Roll call.
Roll call.
Roll call. Do I do everybody?
No, just us. Right?
Okay. Ms. Rosikowitz,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Conway. 2 present, yes,
Thank
1
you.
no.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you again.
All right. All right, so, yeah, so on to agenda item number 3, Superintendent's Goal 6, Alternative School Update, the Engagement Center.
Yes, this report is as a result of a request from school committee, a woman, Kristen Rosikowitz, for additional information on the alternative options for our students, and in particular, the engagement center that's proposed for our 2-year plan to have some other alternatives for students who need either a short-term or a long-term placement from Lowell High School. And that was part of a request when the Career Academy came into place from the school committee to have some viable options for our students who needed to be to have other options other than a long-term placement at the Career Academy, and be able to be supported mid-year, 2 days in, at the end of the year, without any ramifications to the overall population of the Career Academy. So I'm going to turn this over to Director of Alternative Education, Margot Farrick, to share with you some of the highlights of the report.
Thank you. So one of the superintendent's goals was to kind of beef up alternative education. So the goal asserts that if the district continues to clarify the purposes and choices of alternative education programs and opens options that build the level of confidence and academic exposure of at-risk youth, then increased educational options will be available to address students' needs, and the loss of at-risk students will diminish and the dropout rate will decrease over time. What follows is the targeted action steps and the evidence of progress that will address the 2013-2014 goal for the alternative education. Here is some data on the Lowell High School Career Academy. Over the past year, we've had a 41% increase in the daily attendance from when the school was the Malloy. So that's really what we're comparing it to this year as the Career Academy and last year as the Malloy. We had an 18% decrease in the out-of-school suspensions, a 25% decrease in arrests. 100% of our grade 10 students who took the MCAS, and that was all of them who were eligible to take the MCAS, and I have to tell you, I was really proud of them and my staff when they just sat for the test, because sometimes just getting this population to sit, every one of them passed the MCAS, which was amazing, just shows we're on the right track. And then I broke it down into how many credits students earned over the year. And I have to tell you, the credits would look very different if the students' attendance wasn't so difficult. Our attendance rate, although it's increased a lot, it still is a major barrier for kids to actually earn credits. We had one senior who we inherited from the Malloy program who ended up getting his Lowell High School diploma, which was very exciting. We had a ceremony at the school. He did not want to participate, although he was welcome to. With the Lowell High graduation, Headmaster Martin came, and we had a whole ceremony for him, and it was really lovely. And we had one student who was a very high-functioning freshman who came to us, who turned 16, dropped out. We got her into adult ed, and she got her GED. So she won't be considered a dropout because she received her GED prior to the October 1st deadline. So that was very exciting. Another piece of the action steps for alternative ed was really thinking about redesigning the Cardinal, and knowing that when we pulled all the data, when we were looking at the Career Academy and developing it with the Gateway City Grant, we really looked back at the targeted kids that had been in alternative programs prior to even high school, and it really showed that we needed to really look at the Cardinal. And we, because of the coordinator retired and we had a turnover in the social work behavior specialist position, we have a new administrative team there, and it really gave us the time and energy to really think this is a good time to really redesign it. So the model is going to represent the Career Academy a little bit in that it's no longer going to be a 45 to 90-day placement. It's going to be an optional long-term placement. Students will always have the ability to go back to their sending school. The sending school, we're going to build in every 4 or 6 months, really check-ins where the sending school will come and really get consistent data on how the kids are doing, what their success is. Are they ready to go back, and should they go back? Some students are very happy to be in a smaller setting with 15 or less kids in a classroom. But it's about keeping the tie with the sending school and not just feeling like they've sort of been booted out and never to return. The new coordinator was hired. Her name is Michelle LaPointe Butterworth. She's an extraordinarily smart, amazing woman, came beyond highly recommended, even past the interview process. The superintendent was at one of the local collaboratives, and the director of the collaborative came up to her and said, "Do you know who you hired? She is the smartest, best coordinator we've ever had." Like, she came, so I'm really excited to work with her. I think we're gonna collaborate really well. She brings a really strong special ed background. We're working on realigning the staff. This school we're gonna create it into a PBIS school, and they've already spent 5 days in trainings, which happened the week after school got out, and Michelle, the coordinator, was present. They got a ton of work done. The Career Academy staff actually volunteered to work with them to help develop the language. It's a lot of work to develop a tier 1 for the PBIS culture piece of a school. And they are going to be ready to implement tier 1 in the fall, which is very exciting. We were lucky to get grants, and just for the pace of time, I'm not going to go through them all, but as a result of the grants that we were able to get is kind of why we're able to move the timeline ahead and look to do the engagement center a year earlier, because we had a lot of availability and to hire consultants, a lot of professional development time. So I think that's really important to say, that between the coordinator, the cardinal piece, and needing hands-on, the director of alternative ed to be able to be really hands-on in the development of the career of the cardinal is important. So the rationale for the engagement center, it goes back to what the Malloy used to be. It was a 45 to 90-day sort of pressure relief valve for the high school. So kids were struggling at the high school, they were sent there. The data showed they weren't successful. Oftentimes these were the kids who dropped out. And as we redesigned the Malloy into the Career Academy, and trying to have a really stable, healthy culture at the Career Academy, having the transient piece of the high school at-risk students be plopped into the culture was really difficult. The original plan was that it was going to be 2 years before we were going to look to develop something, but we were able to sort of fast-track it, and the timing of everything just really fell into place to develop the engagement center. So this year, we probably had between 20 students referred to the Academy, Career Academy each quarter, and a lot of the work that we did there was triaging the students. What wasn't successful, what can we do? And a lot of the students we referred to the charter school and are doing really well. We have referred a couple to Youth Build, and so it was what was happening anyway, because the Career Academy isn't necessarily going to be the perfect fix for every student either. We also struggled, with the transition when the students were coming in from the high school. It wasn't great for them, and it wasn't great for the Career Academy students. So through considerable consultation with the Department of Education, the Boston Re-Engagement Center, and the Boston Day and Evening Academy, the LPS engagement model was developed. So it's an optional short-term placement for students struggling with behavioral success at Lowell High School. It's going to be a comprehensive student assessment, really looking at what are the barriers of getting in the way. Is it academic? Is it stuff that's happening outside of school, psychosocial, emotional? There's going to be available for 10 hours of tutoring, face-to-face time with certified teachers. We're hoping to have an online curriculum piece, which we're in flux with at the moment. There's going to be social work support, as well as we're trying to partner with CTI for some case management for students who really need, is it housing, is it daycare, like what can we do to help you? And the Career Center is on board to come and meet with our students at the Engagement Center and the Career Academy for employment opportunities. We're developing graduation pathways for students. And this is what I think is really amazing, is that I've been working through this year and through the development of the Career Academy, really building some pretty amazing partnerships with people from UTEC, with Youth Build, Middlesex Community College, Adult Education, and the charter school, which I seem to have not put on here. And really looking at alternative ed students are really a city of Lowell issue, and how can we come together as a community to really meet these students' needs? Because the challenge is when you have one high school and one, developing alternative high school. How are we going to meet the kids' needs that aren't going to fit in to all of these? And all of these programs are coming to the table next week, actually, with the Boston Re-Engagement Center as consultants to really talk about what are the pathways that we can develop for these students. And including the pathway is the regular Lowell High School. Kids are always welcome to go back to the high school or to the Career Academy. But how do we do it in a way that's healthier and successful for them? The staffing for the Engagement Center will be managed by the Director of Alternative Education and supported by a social worker and 4 academic teachers, which will be paid as hourly stipends. And the next steps of the Engagement Center would really, hopefully, to become a re-engagement center, to really be able to create a system of reaching out to the students who we've already lost and try to re-engage them and get them on a path to graduation.
So this had been brought forward to the committee previously regarding at around budget time to discuss that if we were to move forward with this 1 year in advance, it was the plan to put some model in place by the next year, but we really feel that we've made some great progress in this, and we'd like to be able to move forward with it. In order to do so, one of the recommendations to the committee was to shift the Director of Alternative Education from solely working with the Career Academy and supporting with a coordinator position. Because we had an opening, social work opening at the Cardinal O'Connell, we would be looking to shift a social work position to the Cardinal O'Connell, and with the support of the committee, an additional $12,000 to $15,000 to hire the coordinator would help us to continue the work. If you look at the two charts, the chart that's at the bottom of the 3rd page shows you the work of Margot this past year. Her job description details her working very closely with all of the other alternative schools, and that was extremely limited when you need to be there for these students every single day. To have a coordinator to support, similar to the model that's in all of our other programs, we foresee that in the 2014-15 year, if you look at the next chart, what we're looking at is really having the director work with all of the schools on developing curriculum, along with our district coordinators, working on the daily operations of getting the Lowell Public School Engagement Center up and running and facilitating that program, and also working with all of our schools really consistently to get our students back to their sending school if that's the best fit for them. So there's a whole lot detailed in that, but I would ask the committee's consideration for that, because we're very excited about the progress we have made to come this far in 1 year. The data and the students are our data, and the students, smiles on students' faces. I just met a student today who is working from the Career Academy, who's working at our summer camp, and loving it, and the kids are loving him as well. So I think if we can grow positivity and we can show these children success, we can make a difference in many lives. So I thank you for your consideration. I thank the Director of Alternative Education for providing this data for us.
Thanks. To the Deputy Assistant Superintendent Starkin, the loss of the social worker position at the Cardinal, could you talk a little bit about the decision to eliminate that position?
There are currently 2 positions at the Career Academy. There's a behavior modification specialist
and a social worker at that school, so that our other alternative sites have one of those positions, a social work position. So in looking at realigning how the program works, we would shift that position over to the Cardinal position that's open at present time.
Ms. Matt?
So the behavior mod position remains at the Cardinal?
Yes, it does. No, the behavior mod position remains at the Career
Career
Academy.
And then the current Career Academy social worker position moves to an open position that's now at the Cardinal.
Yes,
So the net loss would be felt by the Career Academy.
correct.
Of a
But
full
with the
FTE.
addition of the coordinator, if the committee sees fit to add the additional $12,000 to do so.
So I just had one quick question, and actually, I've brought this up before, I'm sure other committee members have, but, when it comes to introducing new positions, I guess what I see lacking in many instances is there's a lack of sort of measurables, like what is the intended outcome? So what are we going to gain by our investment? I think that the data that we have here is fantastic and shows some significant improvement over last year, but what is it that we're trying to achieve in investing more, infusing more funds into yet another position?
So the data that we showed you shows you what one intensive work in one school alternative program in a year can do. And so what we'd like to do is build that knowledge across the district with the support of Margot being able to be present more readily in each of the alternative sites and working with our community partners. We feel that we can build really strong programs and keep students, and then also be able to refer them back to their sending school so that they can be successful in the regular program if that's the best fit for them. So it would be taking what realistically at this point is that the director's position right now, the bulk of the time is at the Career Academy, and so the efforts to work district-wide, K through 12, are shortened and very limited. And we'd like to be able to expand that and really build, because there are strengths in each of our programs, but they're working in isolation.
Right.
And we can build that strength. It would be amazing for our kids. It would be amazing for the staff in those programs.
Right. And I don't disagree with your statement. I've long felt, since I've been on the committee, that there's been such a disalignment in all of our alternative school programming, and this is certainly an opportunity to realign all of that and put some solid leadership at the head of all of that, and coordinating all those activities in the education pieces. But again, I go back to the measurables. So what are we trying to do? We intend someday to completely eliminate alternative school programs? So do you understand where I'm coming from? So on any given year, is it, what kind of goals are we setting? Is it we're going to reduce our dropout rate by X percentage? Is it, how do we tie all of that in so that we can measure that every single year and say, okay, this is a great investment,
Right.
or maybe we need to put more resources. And I think that in realigning all of this, you'd have a much better, in my view, you would have a much better time of it if you were able to have or spell out very clearly what your measurables are in your goals.
So for this year, our goals were the superintendent's goals.
Right.
And the goal was to reduce the dropout rate and was to increase attendance and reduce the discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've seen some substantial growth at the Career Academy, and we have pockets of excellence in each of our alternative sites and our therapeutic programs, and we'd like to build that cohesive knowledge across the board. We need to make sure that if we're sending students back to their schools, that when they go back to their schools, they're prepared with the curriculum, the same curriculum that they're going back to, so that they don't fall back behind. So there are many, many things that will be improved and supported, but we will maintain, even if it is not a superintendent's goal, we will maintain those tracking of our discipline data, our attendance data, our levels of arrest, and our graduation rates and our promotion rates for all of our students.
And I think it's fair to say we have baseline data now, for first year at the Career Academy, but we have baseline data from the Cardinal from before that we can track. And it's about having the opportunity to get in and really do the assessment and really see what the data is showing now. And personally, my vision is that if we continue to develop as a PBIS district and we do the positive behavior in all schools, that's the crux of treating kids in a way that they're going to connect with school and it's going to feel better for them. And I think alternative ed in Lowell has always sort of had this, sort of negative. It's been the kids that were kind of naughty or the kids that were breaking the rules or caught a crime. Alternative education really should just be an alternative way of kids learning or needing to be taught through the experiential and project-based, through a smaller setting, so over time, do we see alternative ed programs sort of getting morphed into bigger schools and becoming just another opportunity? Yes, I think data is absolutely our friend, and it was an extraordinarily challenging year, and when I wrote this report first, Janine kicked it back and said, I want more specific data. And I was afraid, I delved into it, and I was pleasantly surprised and extraordinarily proud of my staff and my kids and my families and my community that our data looks like this, because going through it day to day was hard. But I'm data-driven. I make all my decisions through data, and I absolutely will keep tracking it for all the programs.
Is there a motion to transfer the funding, the appropriate funding for the director? I'm sorry. Janine, can you provide clarity as to what that?
So it would be a motion to to remove the $15,000 from the suspense account to support the coordinator position.
Okay. So it'd be a motion to remove a transfer of $15,000 from the suspense account to support the coordinator's position.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Ms. Ross-Sikowitz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Okay. Motion to adjourn. Sorry, we're running up against time.
Present. Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Where's Dave?